Clarity on Fire, a podcast for people who know what they don't want out of their life and career, but aren't sure what they'd rather be doing.
In a world where it's easy to exist, but hard to feel alive, we, Kristen
and Rachel,
two certified life and career coaches, are here to help you cut through the information overload, get unstuck, and focus not just on how you can have a career you're passionate about, but how to create a whole life that feels fulfilling.
So join us here, where we serve up inspiration and down-to-earth wisdom in a way that only two best friends can.
We want you to experience the relief of knowing that, yes, you're allowed to want more out of your life and career.
And no, you don't have to wander through the dark anymore. Our job is to light the fire that shows you the way. Let's go. Hello.
Hey, we finally read this book. A few months late, but we still did it.
We did it. Isn't it weird that we're recording this before I leave for my trip, but it's coming out like days after I get back, like almost a week after I get back?
You're going to have gone through a whole bunch of cool stuff between now and then.
Let's hope.
I don't think you can go to the UK and do a little Euro trip
and have a mediocre time
and not come back and be like, I didn't really do anything. I can't imagine that.
No, I'm going to do a lot.
Yeah.
Did I don't think I told some of these people that we're taking a day trip to one of the places Jane Austen lived. And I'm hoping we get to go to her grave.
Oh, that would be cool.
That me and Marissa, who are the biggest Jane Austen fans of any of me and my two friends, you know. Well, I have a lot of friends. No, I don't mean I have two friends. I'm saying
that's what it sounds like.
No, I have a lot of friends. That sounds defensive. I actually do have a fair number of friends.
I really do.
What I'm saying is, of any pairing between me and a friend, she and I are the biggest Jane Austen fans of any.
I would agree with that.
Yeah. So it's like a pilgrimage.
So the two of you have to.
And we're going, it's a private tour. It's just us.
Wow.
And this professor man, this older man who used to be a professor, and his name is Phil. And he's taking us on a tour. It sounds sketchy. How? It's not. It's not. It's a legit website. Now, other people could join it, but as of right now, it's just us two.
Very cool.
Yeah, he takes very small little group tours.
Ask all of your Jane Austen.
Yeah, I've been reading her biography ahead of time, which he recommended as homework. And I was like, yep, I will read that.
Is he a professor who is an expert in Jane Austen?
I think he's a literature expert or something. Okay. But I don't think he was specifically a Jane Austen professor or something.
Like, wow,
but
he really committed.
I think he's just in retirement. He just likes doing this type of stuff. And he might do other types of tours, but he does
that makes
Jane
it sound
Austen
less
tour.
Sketchy that we've got just like an old professor man.
No, I saw his picture. I think we'll be fine. Not to judge a book by its cover or anything, but I think we'll be fine. So yeah.
Well, by the time this episode comes out, we'll know if you're okay.
Yeah. Yeah. That might be one of the, also, can you imagine, like, honestly, the headline on it would be kind of like, you know, 2 girls get killed on a Jane Austen tour. Like, that's just so sad. That can't be how I go out.
That can't be the way you go.
No.
That's too nerdy.
I mean, I don't know. Like, it's a memorable obituary, but it's not going to be mine. So anyway, I'm excited about that. That's probably one of the dorkier things I'm going to be doing.
Well,
because I don't think going to Harry Potter Studios, like the actual studio tour, like the movie sets, we're doing that. That's not dorky. That's just correct.
Of course you do that. We did some dorky stuff and well, I don't know. I mean, I thought the Harry Potter tour was freaking awesome.
Oh, we did a Harry Potter walking tour in Edinburgh. Yeah.
But some people might have thought that was kind of dorky.
Okay. Anyway, I'm going to take a break because Scarlett was working. That might happen multiple times today. She's
feeling feisty today.
She's feeling very frisky. I think she probably senses that she's going to finally get to do what she really wants. And she's so excited, which is live with my dad, which she's going to do for 2 weeks. And she's going to think she finally achieved her lifelong dream of me abandoning her and letting him have her. And
she'll probably be disappointed when you come back.
Yeah. She'll be so upset when I come
Unlike
home.
Those dogs who their owners leave for a couple of weeks or whatever, and then they act
like they're greeting you after you came home from war.
Yeah, no, that's not going to be her.
She's going to be like, okay, when I come back.
Oh, I guess you are here. Okay.
Damn.
Guess I'll go home if I have to.
It's not gonna. She's going to be like 5 pounds heavier too when I pick her up. Okay. Well, we read a book. Okay.
We read a book and
Effortless.
Yes. I guess we should start by saying that this is not Greg McKeown's first book, and not even the first book that we have read or talked about. He wrote a book called Essentialism. When was that? In
2014.
2014.
Effortless is, Effortless, make it easier to do what matters most is the subtitle. It's a sequel.
Sort of.
It's like a follow-up, if not a legit sequel to Essentialism, the subtitle of which is The Disciplined Pursuit of Less. So I thought it might be helpful for you to understand the difference between the two before we dive into what Effortless is about. So the blurb of Essentialism reads, which we really liked Essentialism when we read it, I don't know, 6-7 years ago.
We bring some of the concepts into coaching because it's helpful for taking action and taking...
And I think that this will probably be added to some of the stuff we talk to our clients about when it comes to action.
I think so too.
Because it does help create a good structure around some of the things that we inherently know to be true, but that sometimes can be hard to put into action. So I think we will. And we do have some, not critiques, but comments as we go. I don't really have critiques. It's just
I don't have critiques either. I was amused at parts.
Yes, it was kind of bemused at times. Okay, so anyway, the blurb of Essentialism reads, just so you know what the first book was about. Have you ever found yourself stretched too thin, simultaneously overworked and underutilized, busy but not productive? Like your time is constantly being hijacked by other people's agendas? If you answered yes to any of these, the way out is the way of the essentialist. Essentialism is more than a time management strategy or productivity technique. It's a systematic discipline for discerning what is absolutely essential, then eliminating everything that is not, so we can make the highest possible contribution toward the things that really matter. It's like minimalism for your time and your work life and how you get things done. That's what essentialism is all about.
Yep. And then just to, not to contrast that, but just to give you some more context.
I think to contrast a little bit.
What Effortless is about, I'm going to read you the little blurb about that now. Do you ever feel like things are so much harder than they used to be? You know something is important, yet struggle to get it done? You're running faster, but not moving closer to your goals? You want to make a higher contribution, but lack the energy? As high achievers, we've been conditioned to believe that the path to success is paved with relentless work. That if we want to overachieve, we have to overexert, overthink, and overdo. That if we aren't perpetually exhausted, we're not doing enough. But lately, working hard feels harder than ever. And the more depleted we get, the more effort it takes to make progress. As a result, we're often working twice as hard, only to achieve half as much. Getting ahead doesn't have to be as hard as we make it. There's a better way. Instead of pushing yourself harder, you can find an easier path. Effortless offers actionable advice for making the most essential activities the easiest ones, so you can achieve the results you want without burning out.
So basically, Greg wrote a book about how to incorporate more feminine energy into your life and work without realizing that's what he did. Because I believe if I asked him, does he know the difference between masculine and feminine energy? I don't think he would know what I was talking about. That's my theory. Yeah.
We can't prove this, but I never once did this come up. And I feel like it might have if he'd known about this. But essentially that's what he did. The essentialism is about what to do, the right things to do. And effortless is doing them in the right way that makes them easier and smoother. It's
exactly what we talk about. What you do is important. Yeah. How you do it is sometimes more important.
He wrote a how-to guide on feminine energy without knowing what he was doing.
I would say it's less about feminine energy and more about how to balance masculine and feminine energy.
That's probably is a better description. Yes.
So just to make the point about the feminine energy, though, he does say a couple of things that made me go, okay, yeah, you don't know what you're talking about, but you do, but that's what you're talking about. He said, There's an ebb and flow to life. Rhythms are in everything we do. There are times to push hard and times to rest and recuperate. But these days, many of us are pushing harder and harder all the time. There's no cadence, only grinding effort. That's toxic masculine energy. That's what he's talking about. He's talking about a return to building in feminine energy and the balance between the two.
And a lot of what he gets into in this book is fostering the more feminine energy side of things, because most of us are so skewed on the masculine energy side.
He also says effortless is about a whole new way to work and live, a way to achieve more with ease, to achieve more because you are at ease, which is the most feminine energy thing you could say.
Yep.
So anyway, he thinks he discovered feminine energy.
And that's what we
did
were
not.
Laughing about and a little bit amused about is it's kind of like having a man explain feminine energy to you, but he doesn't know what he's doing.
He doesn't realize he's mansplaining to you. And so like, I'm going to forgive him because I think he's a very nice man.
There's some really valuable stuff in here.
Yes.
Especially if you are newer to this idea. I mean, what's the question we get the most often when we're talking about feminine energy? How do I do it?
Well,
I love the idea, but I don't know what to do. Well, this is going to support you in that.
Yeah. So effortless is divided into three like main parts. He has the effortless state, which is how can we make it easier to focus? Effortless action. How can we make essential work easier to do? And effortless results. How can we get the highest return on the least effort? So I split up my outline into, I've basically pulled 3 or 4 big points from each of those sections. And he made more than 3 or 4 big points, but I had to kind of pick and choose, be a little bit essentialist and effortless about.
And we want you to read the book. So we're not going to give you everything from the book.
But I did pull some main points and stuff from each section. And that's what we're going to do. So we're first going to focus on the effortless state, which Kristen's going to read kind of like a good description of what he means when he says effortless state.
You are like a supercomputer designed with extremely powerful capabilities. You're built to be able to learn quickly, solve problems intuitively, and compute the right next action effortlessly. Under optimal conditions, your brain works at incredible speeds. But just like a supercomputer, your brain does not always perform optimally. Think about how a computer slows down when its hard drive gets cluttered with files and browsing data. The machine still has incredible computing power, but it's less available to perform essential functions. Similarly, when your brain is filled with clutter, like outdated assumptions, negative emotions, and toxic thought patterns, you have less mental energy available to perform what's most essential. A concept in cognitive psychology known as perceptual load theory explains why this is the case. Our brain's processing capability is large, but limited. It already processes over 6,000 thoughts a day. So when we encounter new information, our brains have to make a choice about how to allocate the remaining cognitive resources. And because our brains are programmed to prioritize emotions with high affective value, like fear, resentment, or anger, these strong emotions will generally win out, leaving us with even fewer mental resources to devote to making progress on the things that matter.
Okay, in other words, the effortless state is one in which you are physically rested, emotionally unburdened, and mentally energized. You are completely present, attentive, and focused on what's important in that moment. You are able to do what matters most with ease. How often can we actually say that? Go back and look at that. You're physically rested. You're emotionally unburdened, mentally energized. You're present, attentive, focused on what's important in that moment, and you're able to do what matters most with ease. How many of us can actually check that box?
Like 1% of the time.
I mean, right. So it's important that we understand what that actually means, because it helps us realize how often we have blocks to actually being in that state. And so much of what he talks about in this section, in this whole section of the book, is how do we not just get to that state, but how do we unblock ourselves from what's preventing us from being in that state? Because it's actually natural for us to be there. It's just so much crap
gets in the way.
Yeah.
And when you're there, you can be doing all the same things, but it feels a million times easier to do those things. So it's worth trying to figure it out.
So obviously, there's a lot that could prevent us from getting into the effortless state. But one of the big ones that I really like is that He says, hard work is very badly named. And I'm going to read about that. Okay. All too often, we sacrifice our time, our energy, and even our sanity, almost believing that sacrifice is essential in and of itself. The problem is that the complexity of modern life has created a false dichotomy between things that are essential and hard and things that are easy and trivial. It's almost like a natural law for some people. Trivial things are easy, important things are hard. Our language helps to reveal our deeper assumptions. Think of these revealing phrases. When we accomplish something important, we say it took blood, sweat, and tears. We say important achievements are hard-earned when we might just say earned. We recommend a hard day's work when a day's work would suffice. Yeah.
So a big question
I love this question
he's posing here is, what if the biggest thing keeping us from doing what matters is the false assumption that it has to take tremendous effort? And we all got this honest. This is a societally held belief that gets instilled really young.
Yeah.
And it takes some conscientious effort to ask yourself a question that maybe this doesn't have to be true for me anymore.
Not everything worth doing is actually hard. And that ease is actually a sign that things are going well and are right. But we have been so conditioned opposite of how we're naturally wired. And what's interesting is that our brains are actually wired to resist what they perceive as hard and welcome what it perceives as easy. He calls it the cognitive ease principle, and it's hardwired into us for a good evolutionary reason. He says no one would have survived if we'd been looking for the hardest, most complicated ways to find food or shelter.
Yeah, and yet we're wired to seek out the route of ease, the path of least resistance,
right, to keep us alive.
But then our brains try to downplay it and say it can't be that easy. There's got to be something else here. And so we kind of shoot ourselves in the foot, because if we went with our nature, we're good at this as humans. So instead of fighting our pre-programmed instinct to seek out the easiest path, we could just use this to our advantage and kind of embrace this part of us that's wired into us as humans. So what if failing was a result of actually trying too hard at something?
When he wrote that, I was like,
mind-blowing.
I was like, yes, I endorse that failing, it can be a result of trying too hard, which your puritanical conditioned hackles just went up.
Right.
Because we've attached morality to hard work. That's why it triggers so many of you. And that's why you feel lazy and why you feel guilty when you're not putting in as much effort as you quote unquote should be. It's not because you're wired to do that. You're wired for ease. You've been conditioned socially and morally to think that there's something better and more worthy about you if you work hard, which is not actually true. That's all conditioning. Exactly.
So there's a few, he brings up a lot of ways of
getting into the effortless state.
But we're getting into, what are we getting into? Three of them.
Yeah.
The first one, and to be honest, I used this the day I read it. So I have a little example.
I actually used a lot of this stuff as I was reading it, and it helped.
It does. It helps. So the first thing you can do is just ask the question, what if this could be easy? So sometimes there's things that feel overwhelming or a little bit overcomplicated and you keep procrastinating on them. But if you ask, what if this could be easy? Sometimes interesting results come up. And he gave an example of not getting rid of an old printer that was creating clutter in his office, because he was thinking of all the steps do I get rid of it? Do I replace it?
What do I do with the cords?
Fix it?
Like, isn't that half of the battle? It's like, what do I do with these cords?
And instead he assumed, all right, maybe this could be easy. And 2 minutes later, no kidding, 2 minutes later, he found a colleague who wanted a printer
and took it away.
And just took it off of his hands. Done. Easy. The same thing happened. I was reading this section and there was these 2 pictures that I had ordered that I wanted on my bookcase. And I was like, I got to get frames for these, but I want matching frames and I want them to be like this particular kind. And should I go on Amazon or should I go to Michael's? Or then I have to measure the pictures. And I just kept and it was such a stupid thing, but I just kept not getting frames for these pictures.
And then I thought, there, not being framed, annoying you.
And I read this and I was like, what if this could be easy? And I was going to be going to the grocery store that evening and there's a Michael's on the way. And I was like, I'm just going to pop in and see if I can find some frames. Guess what? The frames were buy one, get one free. And there was the exact thing that I wanted on a stand in the front of the store. I didn't even have to go into the frame section. It was waiting for me right there. I grabbed 2 and I was done in about 5 minutes.
Yep.
Easy. But if you are so caught up in all the steps,
you've already decided it's going to be hard, and you can't find the easy solution.
Yep.
So this is, this reframe, another word for this reframe, which is taking something and flipping it on its head, is inversion. And he talks about like, that's what we need to do, is we need to try to invert the problem as much as we can. And he quotes Seth Godin, who is, if you guys don't know, he's like a very prolific author and blogger, but he actually is very economical with his words. His blogs are like sometimes 50 words. They're really short.
Amazing.
I don't know how he does it, but anyway, he says, if you can think about how hard it is to push a business uphill, particularly when you're just getting started, one answer is to say, why don't you just start a different business you can push downhill? In other words, when you start with massive effort, you have to push for even the smallest results. When you start with a tiny effort, you can snowball downhill into massive results.
I love this so much.
Yeah, it takes so much work if you're trying to push something uphill to even get a little bit of progress. So why can't we just start with the easiest thing and let it snowball, as opposed to having to start super hard and acting like we're more worthy, or we're doing something more correctly just because it's harder. I'm like,
we don't trust the easier path.
No.
But he provides so much proof for why maybe we should, because there's a good reason we're attracted to the easier path. And it's not because we're lazy.
Okay.
Actually, it's because we're efficient.
So thing number 2 in his advice about how to get into the effortless state is stop treating essential and enjoyable like they're mutually exclusive. Important work can be fun when we put aside the puritanical notion that anything worth doing must entail backbreaking effort. Why not pair essential activities with enjoyable ones instead?
One of the things I loved so much about this section is a lot of times we'll do the hard thing and then reward ourselves with a fun thing afterward.
Which
we're like I'm going to treat myself for doing a hard thing.
Which it doesn't necessarily always get me to want to do it.
No. And it's kind of reinforcing that thing sucked. So now I have to do something good to make up for it.
Yeah.
And he's advocating for, why don't we make the harder thing more fun? So for example, he had kind of a silly example, but it was a good example. He didn't like returning voicemails.
We had a lot of them built up at some point.
Yeah,
and he didn't want to have to listen to all of them and call these people back.
So he figured, if I have to do this, why don't I just sit in my hot tub and do it and make it way more enjoyable? Great. Why not? Instead, I feel like most of our brains would have said, if I do this, then I can sit in my hot tub for a little while and enjoy.
Why don't you just call people from your fucking hot tub?
Sure. Why not?
Why not? Like, is that less professional? Who cares?
I have a client right now who one of his top desires or values is fun. He just really wants life to be as fun as possible. And this was one of the things that we came to for him, is instead of using fun as a reward, let's make things that seem like they're not intuitively fun. Can we make them fun? Can we make them more enjoyable? You're much more likely to do something if you can make it more enjoyable.
I did this because I read this section. I was like, okay, I hate working out. I hate it. I will never like it. Okay. And even if it's a 30-minute workout, I don't want to do it. But at some of these videos I've watched enough times that I don't need to listen to them. I can just watch them. So I was like, I love listening to my audiobook. I'm just going to mute this workout video and listen to the audiobook, but I'll watch what the video is doing so that I'm not like off. You know what I mean? Like, I'll do it. That went by a lot faster because I was like enjoying my book as opposed to having to watch this man blab on about what squats I should be doing.
I laughed when I read this in the outline because I have just done the exact same thing. For anyone who I haven't told this to, I'm doing a Harry Potter re-listen, and all I want to do anymore is just listen to Harry Potter. And I just got a Peloton, which I'm super excited about. But sometimes like I don't want to be thinking about working out while I'm working out. And so I did the same thing. And I was laughing because we were having a Rachel moment. We didn't even know it. We were both muting workout videos to listen to audiobooks to make working out more enjoyable. And it helps. It really does help.
Like music doesn't do it for me.
You know, you still have the video up where you see, okay, now I need to move my resistance up, blah, blah, blah. But I'm thinking about Harry Potter the whole time. It made it so much more enjoyable.
So much better. Okay. So he also suggests another way to make habits more fun, or at least easier to get into, is to ritualize them. He defines rituals as habits with a soul, which I like.
I really like that.
And he uses Marie Kondo, of course, as an example, because she created this whole ritual for letting things go that feels meaningful in and of itself. It's not just like the getting rid of crap. It's like you're going through this process that feels like it has weight and significance, which is what a ritual is supposed to do.
Yep.
It like grounds us. It soothes our anxiety. It infuses purpose into things that might otherwise be mundane. I actually have a client who's going to try this with money because she has, you know, I used to have this too, like some fear about logging in and checking her money, and it creates anxiety. And I was like, okay, let's do it 10 minutes a day. I'm like, let's pair it with something you enjoy. And she's like, well, I already have my morning green juice. She's like, maybe I can just do it while I'm having my green juice. I'm like, great. Pair it with something you like doing.
Yeah. I like that. And I'm thinking of a client who she's been trying to do these check-ins with herself on, you know, how is this area of my life feeling? And how is this area of my life feeling? And every 3 or 4 weeks, she tries to do these check-ins, and she's found a little coffee shop, and she gets dressed nice because she doesn't go anywhere because she works at home all the time. So
it's like a date with yourself.
Yeah. And so she puts on like nice clothes and like a little perfume and go gets a nice coffee and then does a little check-in with herself. And it's a ritual.
It's so there's something
ritual. That it's that soul piece of it. It's not just doing a thing to check it off the list. It's infusing a little bit more meaning and like oomph behind it.
Okay.
So the last thing, which I love this so much. It is your responsibility to relax.
I really like the story that he shares, which is about this baseball, like a Major League Baseball manager and longtime coach, Joe Madden, who decided he wanted to build in regular time for his players to do nothing. So he encouraged them to sleep in and take naps and just show up fresh to games instead of like cramming with practice every minute up until the game started. And within a year of implementing this with multiple teams, he did this with the Tampa Bay Devil Rays. They won the World Series within a year. He then took it to the Chicago Cubs. They won the most games in the league over the next 4 years, including the World Series in 2016. So like, you know, people who take breaks perform better. It is science.
It is proven. Rest and work are complementary. They're not opposite. They work best together. So if you can break down, just think about your workday. If you can break down the essential work that you're doing into like 3 sessions that are like 90 minutes a day per day, and then breaks in between, you will have a much more productive day than if you try to just sit down and power through the whole day.
You can't do it. You can't do it. Stop trying. And I actually think 3 90-minute sessions with breaks is a lot.
I think so too.
I think 2 with breaks is perfect.
I think you can get a lot done in 90 minutes if you're really focused and rested.
Yeah, you really can.
Do you remember that workout video that we used to watch? I forget what it was now, but I will never forget the
Metabolic Prime is what
Metabolic Prime. That's right. And the trainer who was like guiding you through the exercises,
Jade.
Of course you remember the trainer's name and everything. He would tell you throughout the whole workout, I love it when you rest. If you need to rest and then come back fully recharged to keep doing the exercise.
He would say rest and work are synergistic, not opposite.
But in my head, I still tell myself that phrase. I love it when you rest.
Yeah.
So it's a really good thing to keep in mind that rest is not counterproductive. In fact, it is the only way to be productive. So a great rule of thumb that he shares in the book is don't do more today than you can completely recover from by tomorrow.
I love it. Oh. I love that. That is exactly what, remember when we went like 8 years ago and we saw Iyanla Vanzant and she spoke at the I Can Do It conference, which I brought up in chapter 4 of Forever Alone.
Yes.
She was one of the speakers and I will never forget her saying, because it made me laugh so hard. She was like, if you wake up on a Tuesday, go to bed on a Tuesday. I'm like, you know what? That's totally right. You know, like, why would you then take your day into the next day? You've just you just shot yourself in the foot.
Right. Because then you're having trouble recovering the next day because you stayed up too late. Yeah. Just do what you can do today, recover from it before the day is done. And then you can start over tomorrow.
Yes.
Love that.
Okay. All right. So now we're moving on to the second part, which is effortless action.
Okay.
So Kristen's going to read from the book again. If you can hear us flipping our pages, I hope that makes this feel more real.
Yeah, we're actually opening our book and kind of reading as we go.
Okay. She wasn't prepared for this part.
I was so into talking about what we were talking about because I just
Kristen
felt strongly about it.
I can do 8 things at once and and you won't know that I'm doing it. And Kristen can do one thing at a time. And sometimes you'll know she's doing it.
I do it essentialist and effortless.
No, it's not effortless though. We're working on that.
We're working on that, but it is essentialist.
Okay, go ahead and read about effortless action, please.
Larry Silverberg is a dynamicist at North Carolina State University. That simply means he is an expert in the movement of physical things. For example, he has studied the movement of millions of free throws over 20 years. One thing he has found over the years is that the most important factor for successfully shooting a free throw is the speed at which you release the ball. To achieve the kinesthetic sweet spot takes practice and muscle memory. The goal is to get to the point where you try without trying, where your movement becomes smooth, natural, and instinctive. That is what is meant by effortless action. If you try too hard when shooting a free throw, you'll tense up and move too fast. This is similar to what happens to many overachievers who have been conditioned to believe that more effort leads to better outcomes. When they invest a lot of effort and don't see the results they want, they lean in harder. They work longer hours, they obsess over the situation more. They're trained to see the lack of progress as a sign that yet more effort is required. What they haven't learned is that past a certain point, more effort doesn't produce better performance. It actually sabotages our performance.
Oh, okay. So economists call this the law of diminishing returns. After a certain point, each extra unit of input produces a decreasing rate of output. So more effort at this point should be questioned. But sometimes overachievers double down on effort. They see the reduced output and mistakenly think the answer is to push even harder, right? It's not working. I got to try harder. The effect of this is then negative returns. The point where we are not merely getting a smaller return on each additional investment, but decreasing our overall output. Like we're actually in the red now. So to avoid diminishing returns and experience effortless action, I now have like 4, I think we're doing 4 things. Yeah, 4 things like to help us avoid diminishing returns and get into effortless action. Okay.
So the first thing, we need to establish clear conditions for what done looks like so we can get there and then stop. So if you don't clearly know when you're going to be done, there's always more to do. And so it can just, the work can just keep spreading into all of your time.
Okay. So I'm going to give you some examples from a chart that he has about how to define, like examples for defining what done looks like, because you have to define done. Okay. Lose weight. That's so vague. I look down at the weighing. So these are his examples. I'm not saying these are my favorite examples. Okay. These are his examples. I look down at the weighing scale and see the number 177 staring back at me.
I like the weighing scale. I feel like we could have
He's British, so maybe that's
a British thing. Yeah. Okay.
Walk more. Reach 10,000 steps a day on my Fitbit for 14 days in a row. Like, okay. Launch my product. Have 10 beta users try the app for a week and give feedback. Okay. So we get it. We're quantifying. We're creating some form of structure. We're creating a visual that we can actually picture in our mind when the thing is done.
And so those were really good examples of done with a goal or
a larger
project.
Goal that you can't finish in a day.
But I would also say you need to define what done is for a day.
He talks about that too. Like, what does it mean to be done with your work today? When you start in the morning or even the night before, what is it going to mean for me to be done tomorrow? And that's such an easy thing. I never do that.
I know.
I never do that. I kind I don't know. We have Asana boards and I have like tasks that are due on specific days.
I have been trying more after reading this, to be honest, but it's not something that comes to mind right away because you're thinking of all the things that have to be done in general.
Right.
And if you don't decide when you'll be done today, you'll just start to everything else will just creep in. And so it's really easy to feel like you're never actually done. And it's an exhausting feeling to feel like you're never done.
Yeah.
And like I never crossed quite enough things off of my list. So we need to, number one, we need to define what does done look like.
And then get there and stop. And then stop.
And then we're going to keep talking about that because that keeps coming.
Yes. Okay. Thing number 2 is take the minimum viable action. Okay.
We often get overwhelmed because, and we all do this, we'll just misjudge like what the first step is. Usually what we think is the first step is actually a whole bunch of steps that we've lumped into one that needs to be broken down. And that's why it feels so overwhelming. Because the first step would be, I need to, for the exercise one, I need to join a gym and start doing yoga every day.
Well, no,
that's not.
Well, which gym?
Right.
Like,
is it yoga every day? How much yoga every day? Does it have to be at a gym? What's the simplest way you could do this? Can you do a downward dog every day?
Right.
That's the first step you could do.
Your first step could be spend 10 minutes Googling gyms.
Sure.
Right. Like there's a lot of steps before you actually walk into a gym, having been a member and go to a yoga class. So the question is, what's your actual first step? And he gives this example of this woman who needs to clear her living room of all of the books that she has stacked around, and it's creating clutter. And I don't know if it was him or someone else was like, why don't you just buy bookshelves? And she's like, well, I don't know if they're going to fit. And they're like, well, why don't you know if they're going to fit? Because I don't have a tape measure.
So your first step,
buy a tape measure.
Get a tape, borrow one from a neighbor, whatever you have to do to get a tape measure. Break it down to the tiniest first step that's no longer overwhelming.
Yeah.
And then the next piece and I really like this idea of instead of sitting down and trying to do a whole big thing, try a micro burst.
Yes.
Of energy, of time. So that might be 10 minutes of focused activity on whatever project, whatever you want to make momentum on. And that can have an immediate effect, just 10 minutes on making progress. And then that almost always snowballs into more energy, more kind of enthusiasm and you might end up spending more than 10 minutes. But if that was your whole goal, just 10 focused minutes, kind of a micro burst of energy toward this thing, you're going to make progress. So he gives a lot of good examples. I want to give an example of what some essential projects are that he describes here, what the first obvious action step would be, and then what a micro burst
would look like. So
one essential project might be, I want to remove the clutter from my garage. First obvious action, and again, we're talking tiniest action step possible. Find the broom.
I mean, if you don't know where it is,
that's the first thing you got to do. A micro burst of energy might be sweep out the shed and move the bikes into the shed. That's it. You can do that in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
That's it. That's all you have to do to start. It's not overwhelming when you think of it that way. Another essential project might be, I want to launch a product. The first obvious action could be open a cloud-based document to put ideas in. That's it. Like a Google Doc.
Yeah.
A microburst of energy might be brainstorm a few product features.
For like 10 minutes.
That's it. Just brainstorm a few features and throw them in your doc that you just opened.
That's it.
You don't have to go launch a project all in one fell swoop. One more example. If you have to complete a large report, maybe the first obvious action step could be, this is really obvious enough, pick up a pen and a piece of paper. I mean, I'm going to say maybe open a Word document because I don't know if people are writing reports.
Well, he had to switch up his example because you already said that. But okay.
But right, get the right utensils to do the work. And a microburst might be just drafting a quick outline for the report. You don't have to write the whole thing right away. Just get a little outline done.
And of course, the theory is, it does not have to be like this, but when you spend 10 minutes microbursting and you're like, oh, I did that. You're like, I could do a little more. Right? Like, you don't have to, but energy begets energy, momentum begets momentum, because we're starting small and we're kind of doing, again, we're going in that downhill ease direction.
Yes.
It can snowball into more energy and it might not be for that thing. You might then feel refreshed enough to go work out, and you might have the energy to go for a run. Like, again, and that energy will beget more momentum.
Exactly.
That's what we're trying to do here, people.
That's when things become more effortless.
Okay. The thing number 3 for getting into the effortless action.
I love this one.
Don't go the extra mile. Question the idea that there's a need or expectation to go above and beyond. Like he says, for example, being asked to do a presentation isn't a good enough reason to create slides with videos and fancy graphics and pages upon pages of data. How often have you been forced to sit through a presentation with too many slides or too many words per slide? He says he now uses 6 slides max with fewer than 10 words per slide. And this man gets paid bank to do presentations for big ass corporations now. And he's literally strolling into like probably Google with like 6 slides and like 60 words. Like, that's it.
That's it.
That's it.
That's all it has to be. You don't have to spend hours and hours and hours and hours making the most beautiful, fancy thing ever.
No.
That's usually not the point of it. So simplicity, he gives a quote, simplicity is the art of maximizing the steps not taken.
I like that definition.
I love this. Because every non-essential step comes with an opportunity cost. So for every non-essential step that you remove, you gain more time, more energy, more cognitive resources to put toward what is essential.
Yeah, everything that's not, you're wasting so much space with everything that's not essential. So,
and usually it's our own preconceived notions of what it has to be, a perfectionism or wanting to go above and beyond. And that's not necessary. And that's not even what people are wanting. Remind yourself, why am I doing this? What is the core point of this? And then how do I just do the most simple version to get to that point? That's all you need to do.
Okay. Thing number 4 for getting into effortless action, slow down. This is my favorite story from the book.
This is my favorite point of the book because I move at a slow pace in life.
So he tells this story about these 2 teams 100 years ago, or over 100 years ago,
a really cool
110
story.
years ago. In 1911, 2 teams set out within days of each other to be the first to try to reach the South Pole. Okay. One team, the leader pushed them to their limits every day, despite what was going on with the weather. Like, it was like, we're going to crush it. The other team set a limit of 15 miles each day, regardless of if it was nice weather and they could have gone further, they still stopped. Every day, it doesn't matter. They stopped at 15 miles every day. The slower team reached the South Pole over a month earlier. And the other team all froze to death on the way home. Because they were exhausted.
Not only did the first team make it there so much earlier, they also made it home safely.
They lived.
Yes.
Yes. So,
and what was crazy is they have records of the
daily logs.
The daily logs.
Yeah.
And the team that was just steadily doing 15 miles every single day and no more, they were like, yeah, this is like, it's going okay. It's
hard, but it's not terrible.
The other people were like, the weather is the worst it's ever been.
Yeah.
And this is miserable. This is impossible.
Totally different experience. Same trip,
same weather, same everything. They were going on the same exact journey and having a completely different experience because they were trying to push themselves and it didn't even work.
This is my favorite mantra from the book. Slow is smooth. Smooth is fast.
Apparently this is a military.
Yeah.
I didn't realize
it's like
that.
a military thing. And I
love that.
I 100% am on board with this. That is the genius of feminine energy. Slow is smooth.
Does this mean
smooth is fast?
I'm actually fast?
No.
Because I move slow?
Well, I don't know. In some ways we could argue maybe. But also you get tripped up a lot. So let's not be.
It's not always smooth for me.
No. Okay. So like surviving the South Pole expedition, you too need to set lower and upper bounds. So that 15 miles a day is what he calls an upper bound.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to read from a chart. He's giving you examples of what setting a lower and an upper bound would look like. because these are like the healthy parameters we're going to work between, just like the South Pole people did. And I'm sure they didn't always make it to 15 miles. They might have stopped before that if the weather was really bad. It's just like on a good day, they were never going to exceed 15 miles. Yeah. Okay. So let's say you wanted to finish reading Les Miserables in 6 months. Okay. The lower bound would be never less than 5 pages a day. Okay. So we're always going to do 5 pages a day. The upper bound is never more than 25 a day. You don't have to read more than 25 pages of Les Mis if you don't want to. No, every day. Hit my sales numbers for the month. Never less than 5 sales calls a day. Never more than 10 a day. Call my family every week. Never talk for less than 5 minutes. Never talk for more than an hour. Don't let your mother keep you on the phone for more than an hour. Also, I like this one. Complete the first draft of a book. Never less than 500 words a day. Never more than 1,000 words a day.
In fact, there was an author that he talked about who said 1,000 words is just about right to stay steady. And if you write too much more than that, it takes too much out of you. And then you won't write for a while.
Yeah, right.
So keeping within those bounds is so important if you want to, if it's like a marathon, it feels like you're running a marathon and it's going to take a while to get there.
Yep.
Don't sprint. He actually gave an example of him running. It wasn't a marathon. It was a
cross country
5K
meet
or something. I don't know. And
he sprinted at the beginning and came in second to last out of like a lot of people.
Because his usual pace was to build up slowly.
Yeah.
And he did it opposite because he was trying to show off to all his friends and family at the beginning.
And then he quit cross country and stopped running.
But that's it. I mean, that's what we'll do. You'll completely burn out and then abandon it altogether. So you won't even finish. So this is maybe one of my favorite points is moving slow,
smooth as fast.
And I mean, we always are talking about what's the minimum you're going to do, but I don't think anyone's ever asked me what's the maximum you're going to do.
I actually, in order to finish doing this outline, I did this because I was like, I'm looking at all the notes I took and this feels like it's going to take forever. And I was like, okay, I'm going to sit down. I'm going to work on this for 30 minutes and whatever I do in 30 minutes is fine.
Yep.
And then I did that twice and it was done. Like on 2 different days, I just did it twice and it was done. Easy. But like if I tried to force it for an hour, I probably would have gotten exhausted and really crabby. And I would have lost focus too.
And by the end, who knows if you were even picking out the stuff you wanted to talk about.
Exactly.
You're just kind of burnt out and grabbing stuff. Yep. Okay. So now we're on to the third
and final section of the book,
which is about effortless results.
What is that?
What is that? So you've continued to cultivate your effortless state. You've started to take effortless action with clarity of objective, tiny, obvious first steps, and a consistent pace. You're achieving the results you want more easily. But now you want those results to flow to you again and again with as little additional effort as possible. There's 3 major things we want to talk about here in terms of how to get more effortless results with less work.
Okay. Are you ready to read? Because you're going to have to read now.
I am.
Okay. Well, no, she's not, but she's going to pretend like she is.
I have it already.
Well, okay. Okay. So the thing number 1 is you need to pursue residual results as opposed to
one time where you have to do the work and then it only
keep
pays
doing
off
it
one time.
over and over again. Okay. So you're going to read kind of examples of non-residual and residual so that you can kind of contrast the two of them.
Okay, so here's some examples of doing the work once and it only pays off once. An entrepreneur who makes money only when she is actively working to make it happen has a linear business model. A father who has to remind his children to do the same chore every day is practicing linear parenting. A student who crams for a test and then just regurgitates facts and gets a grade is acquiring linear knowledge.
Yeah.
Contrast that with what residual results look like. That could be an author who writes a book once, but is paid royalties for years. That's a residual income. It could be a person who makes a one-time decision to exercise every day.
I would like to be that person.
And then they've made the decision once, but then they do it every day.
They don't have to decide every day. I don't understand that person.
This could be a person who does something every day habitually without thinking, without effort. That's residual action. It's kind of what that's
what he just said.
Yeah.
Why is he repeating himself?
I don't know why he's repeating himself.
You saw one about cleaning. There's one about
that's a
parenting.
good one.
Okay.
A mother who delegates a whole chore to her child makes it fun, so it happens every day without prodding. That's practicing residual parenting.
Right. It's
Instead
not
of
like,
saying, I have to remind you every single day to clean your room, instead it's cleaning your room is your responsibility, and we're going to make it fun by playing your favorite Disney songs.
whatever.
Whenever you do it.
Sure. I mean, again, these are okay examples.
Sure.
But you get the idea. Okay, but what I really liked about his explanation of residual results is that in order to get them, you really need to create or pursue principles over methods.
Mm-hmm.
And he gives a very funny example of this in action, which made me completely understand the difference between methods and principles.
Mm-hmm.
So he said, when I was first married, I once decided to surprise my wife by picking up a meat feast pizza, which I knew she liked. When she came home late that night, she was, as I had hoped, delighted. So the next night, I enthusiastically repeated the exercise, surprising her once again with a meat feast pizza. She was so polite that it wasn't until I surprised her for the third night in a row that she said, "Oh, meat feast pizza again?" Clearly, the method I had employed so successfully on the first night could be applied only so many times. Once, in this case. What if, instead of repeating this method a few too many times, I'd sought out a principle that captured who my wife really was, what she really valued, what consistently delighted her? It takes more investment up front to gain this depth of insight. However, once you have it, you can apply it again and again. The method was buy my wife a pizza. The principle was do something thoughtful that my wife
take something
enjoys,
off her plate.
that takes something off her plate. Yes. Like the method is not that helpful. You only can use it a couple times before it gets stale. The principle is residual and evergreen.
Yes.
That's what we're doing.
Oh, poor guy. He was trying so hard. But
Yes.
missed the
And
mark.
so like, that's the, like in the test taking, he talked about linear being like cramming for a test and then completely forgetting everything you just learned.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Versus
the memorizing
learning
dates
principles.
versus learning how to be a good writer. Like learning the
Yes.
principles of good writing means that you have that skill and that's not something that you forget. Whereas the date of when a history event or a battle happened, like that's not actually teaching you anything that helps you later on down the road necessarily. So I agree that it's so much more useful to have good principles than it is to have good methods.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So, okay. Thing number 2 to get effortless results is create a high trust structure around you.
Okay,
This is like involving the people that you surround yourself with and that you work with.
Mm-hmm. There are 3 parties to every relationship: person A, person B, and the structure that governs them. When trust becomes an issue, most people point at the other person. The manager blames the employee blames the manager. The teacher blames the student blames the teacher. The parent blames the child blames the parent. Sometimes we are able to recognize that we were the ones at fault, but we rarely think to blame the structure of the relationship itself. Every relationship has a structure, even if it's an unspoken, unclear one. A low trust structure is one where expectations are unclear, where goals are incompatible or at odds, where people don't know who is doing what, where the rules are ambiguous and nobody knows the standards for success, and where the priorities are unclear and the incentives are misaligned. A high trust structure, on the other hand, is one where expectations are clear. Goals are shared, roles are clearly delineated, the rules and standards are articulated, and the right results are prioritized, incentivized, and rewarded consistently and not just sometimes. This is huge. So what are the the ways that we interact with each other that make us feel like we can trust the other person?
Yeah. We're just describing those low trust structures, just describe so many people's work environment.
And
like that's why they're having a bad time.
Families.
Oh, for sure.
Often.
Families. So if we want to try to create a high trust situation, he breaks it down into 5 R's and like a question for each word. Okay. So this is super simple just to get you thinking about how would I, if I have any sort of power to create more trust in my environment, because it's so true. Like when you have more trust, you don't have to be micromanaging anybody.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to be worrying about who's doing what. Like so much more can get done with ease because there's clarity. So anyway, okay. Results. What results do we want? Roles. Who is doing what? Rules. What minimum viable standards must be kept? Resources. What resources, people, money, tools are available and needed? Rewards. How will progress be evaluated and rewarded? Like, if you just did that, I bet some of the projects and some of the things that you're working on at, your job or whatever could be made a little bit easier.
It seems really obvious, but most of the time we're misinterpreting this. We have our own idea of what each of those things is, and someone else might have a different one. If they're not articulated, we don't get on the same page. Then we feel like we can't trust the other person, but it's really just, we didn't clarify it at the beginning. So the structure was not solid.
Yeah. Okay.
The third thing,
and last point that we're making.
Last point is, why not prevent problems so you don't have to solve them in the first place? So prevention as the solution.
Yes. I like this. What's the total cost of dealing with a problem that continually pops up because you keep managing the symptoms rather than striking at the root?
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, let's talk about some examples.
Yeah, and I have some thoughts about this. You can read from the examples, but then I got more to say.
Yeah. Here's some examples of what it looks like to
what he thinks it looks like to strike at the root. Let's use that.
Well, hacking at the branches versus striking at the root.
Yes.
So how some of his examples, and we probably have.
Yeah, I have better things to say about this. Go ahead.
A doctor treats a heart problem through years of medication followed by highly invasive surgery. That is hacking at the branches.
Sure.
We're just managing symptoms. Striking at the root would be a doctor encouraging a patient to eat right, exercise, and schedule regular checkups.
That's trunk level. I can tell you what the root would really be. But okay, the root is,
there's some emotional stuff we need to take care of too.
Right, why are we being drawn toward an unhealthy lifestyle? Do we hate ourselves? Do we not feel worthy of being able to eat good food? Are we having money problems that make it hard for us to invest in the right thing? Like, okay, that's his definition of the root. I got deeper definitions of the root, but we get where he's going.
Where he's going is, we don't want to just manage symptoms. We want to get to the heart of the matter, and you can only decide what the heart of the matter is for you. But
that's not true. I think a good coach and therapist can tell you what the heart of the matter is.
That's true. But I mean, he's probably not going to be able to get to the real heart.
That's not what he does. So this is where he's stopping.
Another example of hacking at the branches would be an educator constantly complaining about students not paying attention in class.
Sure.
Striking at the root would be an educator signing a social contract with parents and students regarding expectations before the year begins.
Again, why is the kid really, why is the kid really acting up in class?
Right.
Like, and are the parents the problem?
And is having a 12-year-old sign a social contract really make them pay attention all year long?
You can stop reading these examples. Like, they get it. But so actually, that's one of my biggest. So there's a lot. In conclusion, there's a lot to get out of this book, especially if you're someone who wants to be able to sort of find those more masculine hacks for doing things in a more feminine way. You'll enjoy this book. You'll get a lot out of it. It will reframe a lot of things for you. It will give you good ideas. The biggest criticism I have is that it does sort of skim over, because this isn't his area of expertise, a lot of the deeper emotional issues that prevent us from being able to actually implement. Because sure, it does make sense to, invert the question, what if this could be easy? But he's not actually striking at the real root of what keeps people from pursuing ease, which is they feel like they're literally lazy people if they don't constantly work hard. And he's trying to convince you that's not true, because look at all these great examples of people who are successful. And that's great. And it's not necessarily going to convince you, based on your deep family baggage and history, that you're not lazy and unworthy if you're not constantly producing something. So ironically, he's not actually penetrating the deepest roots of why someone would have blocks around this. But that's okay.
He's not a psychologist. He's not a coach. That's not why we're coming to him. And that's fine. I mean, he even says in one of the quotes that I read at the beginning that often what gets in the way of the effortless state is negative emotion, anger, fear, judgment, criticism.
But that's not his expertise. So he didn't linger on that at all.
Right. So there is a recognition there, but that's not necessarily, we know that, but overcoming it is
Right,
a
so
little bit
know
of a
what you're
deeper
getting when you read this
experience.
book, right? Like
That's fine. That's
you're
fine.
getting like some very helpful hacks, some tips and tricks
Mhm.
that are useful.
And if you used a lot of this, you would feel a lot more
Sure.
balanced in your life.
Yeah.
That is, I guarantee that. Just don't expect it to.
It's not going to deeply blow your mind in some like psychological way and you're going to walk away crying.
No. That's like
not what this book
Glennon.
is. Yeah, if you want to read Glennon Doyle if you want that.
Sure. That's not Greg McKeown, but that's fine. Really more so if you are still trying to figure out this feminine energy thing and you're really curious about it and you're getting stuck, this is a great entry point. If you are already quite familiar with feminine energy, some of these things might feel a little bit obvious to you.
Yeah.
That's
This book would
fine.
have blown my mind like 7 years
There's
ago.
still-
And now I'm like,
There are still
Okay.
a few things that I took away. So I would say, I'm not going to
I'm
say don't
gonna-
read it.
I'm
'cause-
going to work out with audiobooks a lot more often now.
Sure. And I'm going to ask myself, why am I acting like this is so hard? Why don't I make it easy?
And I'm going to say slow is smooth, smooth is fast.
I'm
A
gonna say that
lot.
all the time.
Yeah. I mean, I did love a lot of the things I got out of it. So,
Might I use it as an excuse sometimes? Maybe.
Well, I can call
But-
you out on that.
It's fine. I love it too much. But yeah, there's some really good nuggets in here. So definitely read it, but don't expect that this is like the deepest, most emotionally complex version of.
But do you need it to be emotionally complex?
No.
That's kind of the
No,
that's part of the point is that sometimes you do just need a tip and a trick and a hack.
sure.
So
And we don't do a lot of those books. So it's kind
No.
of nice to be able to share some of those just quick how-tos.
Yeah.
Try this. It will make a difference. Bam.
all right. Well, we're curious what you got out of this, if there's something you're gonna go implement.
If you haven't read Essentialism, I would say do that too.
Yeah, I really like
You don't have to
Essentialism.
read Essentialism first before you
No.
read this book. They work well together, but it's not required reading.
They're complementary as they
Exactly.
were designed to be.
Exactly.
But we would like to hear your thoughts on this. Not if it just not you don't have to have read the book, like literally just listening to this. If there's something you liked that you're gonna put in your back pocket and actually try to do. There's a lot of good tips we just shared. So
And there's more in there that we didn't get to because we didn't
Yeah.
want to. Well, first of all,
I'm
we
not
didn't have time to
tell you the
summarize the
whole
whole book, and also leave a little bit to be surprised by if you decide to go read it.
Okay. So that's that.
Okay.
And we will be back next Friday.
with the Dear Rachel, right?
That is correct.
That is correct.
Okay.
All right. See you then.
Bye.